Thank you. So I'm Ryan Hudson, and I'm one of the founders of a company, I guess, from batch 2 called Honey. We make shopping tools that make it easy for people like you to save time and money when you're shopping online. So our first product was a browser extension that automatically finds and applies coupon codes while you're checking out at any store. So the way this works is you visit our website and install a browser extension one time. And the next time you're at any of your favorite stores and you hit the page that has the coupon code box and challenging you to go off and find a deal somewhere else, Honey pops out automatically and offers to find and test every single coupon code that we have in our database against your live cart. And so you simply click the button, Honey runs and tests all the coupons, and you quickly have an answer on whether or not you should buy right now. And the answer is always yes. The answer is yes, there's either a coupon code or there's not, and you don't need to go search. And so we drive conversion for our merchant partners that way. And so Honey is essentially free software that gives you free money for doing less work. And not surprisingly, this is pretty popular for consumers. So I guess the start back to 2012, we started this company. Wrote the first lines of code for it in October, and we knew that we needed to scramble to get out before the holidays because there was an opportunity for us to ride the holiday wave of PR and exposure and people thinking about shopping generally. So we thought it would be a good idea to hire a bunch of people on Amazon's Mechanical Turk to test our browser extension on 3 different stores, tell us if it worked. We paid each of them $1. We figured worst case, we just had $1 paid customer acquisition, which was pretty decent. What we didn't expect was that one of our beta testers was a member of the Reddit community, and he posted it to a random subreddit, and we had 1,000 users the first day. And as often happens on Reddit, the next day, somebody cross-posted to another subreddit, and we had another couple thousand users. And this repeated through the holidays, and we ended up having tens of thousands of active users right out of the gate, blowing past whatever our expectations were on the consumer side. And so naturally, as entrepreneurs who are starving, bootstrapping up until that point, tried a bunch of other things that didn't work, we did what everybody else would do, and we hit the road for Sand Hill Road. This companies were based down in Los Angeles, so literally drove up 6 hours each way. Over the course of several weeks, we realized that we were not going to be the most interesting thing for investors. Around that time, actually exactly that time, Fred Wilson told the world, "I'm convinced that the next large set of valuable consumer-facing services will use mobile as the primary interface." So that's great because we were launching a desktop toolbar with the hopes of one day maybe monetizing through affiliate and trying to present this as an opportunity. It's like literally 3 decades-old technologies packaged together, and not even the best ones, because the common perception at the time was we were not mobile. Toolbar equals malware. Everybody had been absolutely burned by previous toolbars, and literally most of them were malware, so this was not an unfounded perception. Affiliate isn't exactly the most strategic part of most people's marketing organizations, and so from an investor point of view, despite the consumer excitement for what we were doing, it was not clear that this was something that they would attach their reputation to. And so we were unable to raise a seed round. Maybe we're just terrible fundraisers, but I'll blame this because it makes me feel better about myself. We were kind of forced into bootstrapping the company. And so we saw something where we had a very interesting product for consumers, and the opportunities to build interesting things on top of that were unlocked with scale. And we were growing organically on a fairly long cycle time. This isn't like a viral chat app where people are telling each other about it daily. It's the next time you go shopping and you find a coupon code after today and you've all gone to joinhoney.com and installed their browser extension, 2 months from now, you're going to save money and you're going to tell everybody that you know. Unfortunately for us, that meant that the bootstrapping phase of the company was a year and a half before we were able to raise any money. Fortunately, we did eventually get there, and actually Plug and Play was the second outside money to enter into our cap table, which was exciting for us and hopefully now for them too. But what we saw with what we were building was an opportunity to create a community of users helping each other find the best deals on the internet. And that's really what kept us going even through the harder phases of literally personally running out of money. And I actually worked for another company for a year during the bootstrapping phase. So this is not an overnight success by any means. I think if we would have done a better job pitching this at the time, we would have realized that what we were building was Waze for shopping. If you think about Waze, the driving directions traffic application, hopefully most of you are familiar with it, or else the analogy is worthless. But basically, there's a fundamental difference in the type of consumer experience that you can create if you have real-time data about where the cars are on the roads. Like traffic information fundamentally changes how you design mapping, routing algorithms, and you cannot build as good of a mobile application that tells you how to get from point A to point B without that data as if you had it. For a long time, there were companies actually trying to collect that data by instrumenting the freeways of the country, going out there literally installing sensors to understand what the traffic patterns were on the most important roads. And then out of nowhere, all of a sudden, everybody had a GPS-connected sensor in their pocket. And it wasn't until somebody like Waze realized what you could do with that if you created the right incentive structure for consumers. It really comes down to that. If you think about what a mobile application that keeps track of where you are, reports back your location to a server, that sounds exactly like the shady toolbar malware from the desktop if you don't have the right context for it. But what they realized is if you created the right incentive structure for consumers to contribute this data, everybody would actually have a better experience. And so what we're doing for shopping is essentially a similar sort of story. We have the ability to see a lot of things about how people are shopping and identify patterns that can make a better consumer shopping experience than if you didn't have that data. And so we've been able to take this core user experience hook of finding people free money really easily and build a community of 5 million active members. And they spend over $500 million each month online. We monetize pretty well with our 8,000 merchant partners, and so we've been able to continue to reinvest in growing this community. And there's a lot now that we can do with 5 million users telling us interesting information about shopping patterns that you can't do when we had a couple thousand when we first started. And so the opportunities are very different today. So for us, this all comes down to earning, and I mean really earning user trust. Like the things that we want to do to build a better shopping experience for consumers fundamentally are built upon this relationship that we have with consumers. If we violate their trust, that's gone in a second. And so even in the days when we literally had no money and I literally had to take another job, and the shadiest people in the world were contacting us regularly asking if we wanted to sell data, the answer was always a firm no. We don't sell data. We are not spyware, we're not malware, we're not ever going to be that. We recognize the power that we've been entrusted by our users with, and it's something that is core to the type of company that we build and the type of opportunity that we think we can use, just like with Waze and driving directions. If you actually contribute this data back, everybody can win. And so we have a prioritization shortcut that fundamentally dictates how we make decisions. Our members, the shoppers, are always first, even ahead of the merchant interests. Like the merchants, at the end of the day, are the ones that pay us, but they're not as important as our shoppers. We can't do anything to violate that trust, including selling data to merchants. There's a lot of people that would be very interested in that. That's not something we're going to do. And even more important than we are, like we fundamentally sit at the bottom. The only way that we are successful as a company is if we build a consumer experience that gets people excited about being a member of Honey and what those opportunities entail. So you'd think this would be a pretty straightforward thing and would be more commonplace, at least maybe we're idealists and we see it that way, but there's actually not a lot of industries that are constructed that way. If you look at advertising, you fundamentally have a relationship between a publisher and an advertiser to show ads to consumers who didn't ask for them and don't want to see it. And the consumer literally has no voice in that transaction. Like, they can either go to the site and see the ads or not. Not surprisingly, a lot of consumers are turning to a brute force approach of ad blocking in order to eliminate this problem for them. We actually did a study of our users when we were growing purely organically. This number's a little bit lower today, but 84% of our users were using one or more ad blockers. Like, people literally would have 4 or 5 different ad blockers running because they just don't want to see ads. And the problem is that they're not included in the decision process on what ads are shown to them. So we think there's a better way. And it's going to take, a lot of the ways that we can build value for consumers ultimately come down to building better tools for merchants too. And so one of the things that everybody in retail, except Amazon, has to deal with is that they exist within a very small sliver of a consumer's overall shopping patterns. Amazon might see 40, 50+% of a consumer's purchase intent as it happens. They go straight to Amazon, they're a Prime member. For everybody else, they're literally seeing less than 1%. Maybe Walmart sees a couple percent of a consumer's purchase intent across different stores. And you can have the fanciest big data technologies to try to do all sorts of things, but fundamentally, if you have drive-by logged out users that you're seeing 3% of their journey, you don't know if they're visiting other stores, you don't know if they're Amazon Prime members, you don't know what stage they are in the purchase funnel because you didn't see it. And so we think there's an opportunity for us to work with merchants to build a platform that actually addresses this problem in a way that is beneficial to consumers too. And so if half of the money I spend on advertising is wasted, and the trouble is you don't know which half, what if you could figure out which half you're wasting? What if you could figure out which half you're wasting and give it back to consumers? Like, wouldn't that create a fundamentally more efficient system? If you look at the ad options available to retailers today, it basically boils down to 2 major buckets. You have search engine marketing, and it's very efficient. When consumers express their keyword intent, part of the reason it works as well as it does is they're expressing that intent. The problem and challenge for retailers is they're not always going to do that. It's a very small subset of searches now that even hit Google. A lot of them go straight to Amazon search or never materialize as a keyword search in the first place. So then it comes down to display retargeting. And display broadly doesn't really work too well for retail. It really comes down to just the retargeting piece that works. And the problem with that is if you ask any consumer, one of the reasons that they install that ad blocker in the first place is they're annoyed by products that follow them around the internet even after they've lost interest or never had interest in the first place. Like, even the best constructed retargeting campaign doesn't know that somebody was visiting 4 other stores and they already bought it somewhere else. And while that ad still is ROI positive, it's driving consumers en masse to try to tune out that noise. It's fundamentally not a channel that they want to be contacted through. And so what can we do about that? Well, I was kind of surprised as I was preparing to put this together over the weekend to see that one of, I wouldn't quite say a nemesis of ours, but one of the people beating the drum loudest on this mobile, especially within the investment community, has been Benedict Evans. He's at Andreessen Horowitz. He's a really smart guy. He's actually right on all this stuff. It's just annoying to us because we're desktop. But he said something insightful over the weekend. Amazon is building an on-site ad business, feels tactical. The strategic play is converting ad budgets to lower prices. It's interesting to me because we've literally said that phrase thousands of times since we started Honey. Like, the key opportunity here is converting the waste that exists within advertising into lower prices for consumers. That's how we're all going to compete with Amazon. It's really about unlocking that wasted potential where the best performing ad channels today, you're spending $1 to get $5 in sales. That's 20% cost of user acquisition, and that's probably really good. Actually, Snapchat's S1, they're bragging about getting a $6 return. That's the best case study for their public filing. And so we think that there's an opportunity to build something where consumers are opting in to getting the right types of messages from merchants. This also reminded me of our early fundraising days, and I think this kind of gets the theme I'd like to wrap up around, is that a Honey mobile application would have failed. I have no doubt about it. We never built one, despite investors insisting that, hey, if you were mobile, we could fund you. This is very interesting. Everybody's going mobile. What's your mobile strategy? Are you doing anything in mobile? Well, what are you doing in mobile? And fundamentally, the reason we've been successful on the desktop is because the platform that we're building on solves the retention problem that you get when you're trying to build a mobile application. We get retention out of the box. Like, if you go install Honey tonight, 2 months from now, you completely forget that we exist, and we appear automatically in line at the exact moment we can deliver value. We don't have to train you to do that. Like, we have consumers saying all the time, hey, I forgot that Honey was even there, and then it was there, and that's awesome. That doesn't work on mobile. On mobile, you have to have a repeating, compelling use case that gets a user to think about your app top of mind. And I think this is a challenge for all retailers in building a mobile app strategy, is that a lot of the dollars that have flown into mobile are skimming some of the best customers people have. So the initial signs look promising that you're, like, think about who would install a mobile application for a retailer. It's literally the top % of the top percentage of their most loyal customers. So they naturally spend more. They naturally are likely to convert when they do. But how do you reach new customers? You literally cannot. And we see increasingly in our data that consumers are shopping Amazon and they're not looking at other alternatives. And that's a dangerous world for everybody that competes with them, and it's not great for consumer choice in the long run either. So one of the things that was really interesting about Honey is that our initial consumer product is interesting, but it's not enough. Like, the real compelling opportunity is the second order opportunities that are unlocked only when you get to a certain level of success or things going as you hope. If you look at companies like Google, they weren't the first search engine. If you look at Facebook, they weren't the first social network. Even looking at Uber, like, the black car part of their business isn't the part that's interesting. What's interesting is that they position themselves with assets that could be applied toward other opportunities that are literally not accessible to other people. So as a startup, you can't just go out and say that you're going to do a lot of these things. For Honey today, like, with our user base, we can build a lot of really compelling, interesting products that you cannot do otherwise. And it's a very interesting thought exercise to then apply that and think about what other opportunities are out there that only certain people will have access to even try. So optionality is a word I use a lot around our office. It's something that, as a former VC, a long time ago, I used to do that side of the stuff too. I think a lot of VCs, or almost every VC, is a very good risk manager. They can identify risks, they can assign probabilities to risk, they can do things to mitigate risk and see around the corner and help their companies avoid known problems. I think what differentiates some of the best investors and innovators is really understanding the value of optionality and what is possible if you get to a certain point. So it's that second order piece that really creates some of the most valuable companies and the most exciting opportunities in the world. And so I would encourage everybody here to think about what optionality or which opportunities are available uniquely to you as an individual or uniquely to you as an organization, and really think about what you can do and what the different perspective is. Because I think the more diversity of starting points that we have across the world, and I think this is one of the drivers behind a need for diversity in the startup community, is that having a diversity of points of view actually leads to completely different observations about what's possible in the world. And so with that, I'd like to close out and say again, thank you to Plug and Play. We definitely needed your money when we got started, and fully appreciate everything that it let us do, because we wouldn't have been able to get all the way to where we are without your support. So appreciate that. Thank you.